Hey YouTubers, today we're going to be staining some slab doors. They're made with solid wood, but for the demonstration I'm going to do could be applied equally as well to a veneer slab door or panel door. So let's get into the demonstration. So this is what our door looks like. You can see it's solid wood and it just has two panels in it. It's made with pine. So you can see how white it is, and we're going to stain it sort of a mid-brown color. And then you can see that we actually have a workbench that we can work on. And I may do a demonstration on how to stain it in a vertical position. For now I'll demonstrate how we actually stain these doors and some nuances about using a liquid stain. So we'll start off by staining the small panel. Then we'll get warmed up, we'll move on to the large panel. Then we'll do our crossers, top and bottom and in the middle. And then we'll do our vertical flats. We'll also at this point stain the top and bottom of the door, and then we'll put it up to dry. And then when we do the other side later, we'll do these vertical edges. So before we get started, we want to check all our edges for labels. And there was a label on this, but it's been peeled off already and cleaned up a little bit. And so now we're ready to stain. Now, as I mentioned, we're using a runny stain. Now, a lot of people like to use a rag to apply this because they feel they have better control on it. But that might be okay for something that you don't see, maybe trim or maybe a ceiling, where you don't see the lap marks or the overlapping marks made by the liquid stain. So what I like to do is use the brush and then rag out section for section. So I'll show you how I go about it. So this is the stain we're using. It's an indoor wood stain, of course, but you can see the consistency of it. You can see it moving around in the can there. It's very, very watery. And so we have to watch for drips, and we have to watch for these overlap marks that I mentioned. These are the hazards of staining this type of product. There are other products that are a lot friendlier to use, say a gel stain, which is a lot more solid and it doesn't have problems with the overlapping situation that we're trying to avoid. So another thing too is when you open this stain, you want to stir it, not shake it. You don't want to get a whole bunch of air bubbles in here, and this is especially so when we do the clear coat. But we want to get into good habits, so never shake, and for that matter we don't have to shake paint. Once it comes from the store, from then on we're just stirring it. And so it is too with the stain. We want to stir it, make sure all the solids are in the liquid, then we get a true color, and then we're good to go. So let's get into our demonstration. Also want to have some fresh rags, clean rags handy that are lint free and color free, because we don't want anything getting transferred into the stain once we start wiping it off. Now to get over to this panel, we have to cross this crosser here. And I don't want to get any stain on that yet. I want to do the center panels. So I don't want to start getting stain anywhere else on the project until these center panels are done. Once they're stained, we can do these, and if we get stain onto this panel, because it already has stain penetrated into the wood, it won't affect it. If we try and do it the other way around, we get into all kinds of problems. So just to be able to get over this threshold, so to speak, we're going to use the rag just to protect the transfer over. So load up your brush, shake off the worst of it. There's still going to be a lot of stain in there because it's like water. Hold it over your rag, and then we want to start from the inside corner of our piece. We always want to start from the edges. And we want to keep the leading edge wet, but we don't want to leave a puddle too long in any given spot. So we want to start spreading that product through, and we'll work fairly quickly, but don't feel too anxious about the whole project, because we can fix mistakes. And don't be overly concerned if you get a little stain on like that, because in the overall scheme of things, we can make it look good. Now we also want to do the panels first, because these are what the eye is drawn to, the bulk of the door. So we want to make those look really good. So we work on them first, make them look really good, and then we work around it. And it's probably a good idea to, whether we're painting or staining, paint the panels out first and then work out to the edges. So all these things are good habits that we want to get into. So then you finish off that inside edge. Now that the whole thing has been applied, check it over. Make sure there's no dry spots. Just like painting, we want to make sure the whole surface is covered and the stain is penetrating into the wood. But we don't want to leave a big glob or big puddle in there so that it soaks right in and then it leaves a dark patch that we have to try to fix. So then you just start with the rag where we started, and you want to, like your brushwork, you want to go with the stain. Avoid wiping across, because it could leave a horizontal line across your vertical grain, or vice versa. So just work with the grain, work into the corners there. You can move across just a little bit to get the edges there. Wipe it back. Your rag gets a little loaded with stain, wipe it off. Now the stain will go on darker than it dries, so don't be alarmed. Also, the look we're going for here is quite rustic, so we haven't conditioned the wood. Now with pine, we have a tendency to have this modelly effect, but it will settle down as the stain dries, so don't panic about that too much. And after all, wood is a natural product, so you're going to have variances in the grain and in the surface of the product. And even with conditioning, it's somewhat limited as to, it doesn't guarantee that you won't get any unevenness in the stain. So just a couple of things to think of there. Now we move on to the next panel. So now we've got warmed up, we've got a feel for what's going on. So we do the other panel, so we're going to load this. And maybe I'm going to demonstrate what we could do perhaps if we make a mistake. So say we have our brush loaded up, and we want to transfer this over, but I drift like this. Okay, so the first thing is we don't want to panic, but we want to brush that through right away. Instead of going to our corner, we just work with where the mistake is, and we're going to have to deal with this one too. So you just go to the edge of the work, just like you were starting again, and you just have to deal with it right away. So then you can work that in. If you leave it, those blotch marks will stay in the wood and they will look awful. But now you have stain on here, you don't have to worry about it. We can go back to our process, starting from the edges. Because we're going with the grain, if you get this separation here in the color, it won't show up as badly, and it gives you a chance to fill it in. So you just keep working your way across, starting from the inside edge. Fill it in like you're painting. Just go right to the edges. And don't leave those, remember, don't leave those big puddles, because they'll just sit in there and soak and look like a black spot. Keep going, work at a pretty good pace. Get that on there. Again, go over the whole thing, make sure that the stain is penetrating in. you haven't missed any spots, so you don't get any misses. And you deal with the inside edges while we're here. Again, it doesn't matter if you go up slightly. If you're going in the direction of the grain, make sure you don't leave that there. And you build up so it can get dark. As long as you're going with the direction of the grain, it will not show up too bad. Like here, that will be hidden when you paint your vertical flats. So now when you stain the cross here, you drag your brush along, you can create a horizontal line against this grain which is going this way. So make sure that you even that out and make sure that you don't leave a puddle there. Okay, now we're ready to rag off. Just find a clean part of your rag into the corner where you started. Just right across, take off that excess stain, work your way back. So. All right, and you get your crosser here that we did in advance because of that little mistake we made. There you have it. Now while we're here, we're going to do the top edge. What we want to do here is use the tip of the brush and aim at the top of the space here. So if the stain runs, it runs down but not underneath. We don't want that because we may not be getting to that for a while. So we work the stain on the top, and then we see that it's not too runny. We can brush it down. And it's not so critical because you won't really see this area. But we must seal it, same as the other sections of the door. And again, we do this when we paint, because we're quality painters. We don't leave the tops and bottoms of the doors. And that means we keep the warranty on the door. And the door doesn't go out of shape because moisture is getting into it. And we keep our good reputation as quality painters. Now I believe I mentioned I was going to do a vertical demonstration in case your doors are already installed and you just don't feel like taking them off, or have already been adjusted for temperature conditions or what have you. Whatever reason you don't want to take them off or you can't take them off, you can do this vertical application. So it's the same thing. You just take your product. If you want to hold a can, you can just transfer some off into a clean cut can. But my can is fairly close by here, so I'm just going to work like this. Same thing. If we want to keep our space clean, we've got our drop sheets down, what have you. But we can protect ourselves by having the rag handy. And what I would do is the same thing, start in that corner, start in the edge and work down. And if it begins to run, it'll just run down. Now I shouldn't have done that. See how I did that brush? It leaves that overlap mark. So now I'm going to have a hard time. I did it again. I'm going to have a hard time blending that out. But I could be able to do it. But I don't want to give myself more work than is necessary. So we'll keep that rag handy. And just work our way down. We don't want to leave that too dark a puddle there again. Even though it's on a vertical application, that stain will still sink in if it's left too long. So we keep working our way down. And if we're going to leave a dry edge, we want to leave it running with the grain like this. But we want to keep the work moving. And try to keep a wet edge, just like we were painting. Try to work clean, try to be in control. Once you get working with it, you understand the product, how it performs a little better, whether it be runny like this or a little firmer. Either way, once we get working with it, we get to know our limits, we get to know how to fix the mistakes if we make any. Do what we have to make it look good. When we take our rag, start at the beginning. Again, we got a little bit of stain here, but it's going in the direction of the grain. Same here. Don't worry too much about that. But when we rag off, we want to go with the grain. Again, we don't want to start working across like this, because we can create lines in the grain of the wood. We won't get out. So you see we have our overlap mark here. But because the wood is so variegated, it doesn't look that obvious. If we were to do this all the way through our project, it would stand out and look really bad. So we want to avoid that at all costs. We want to make our stroke all the way through the piece. And then we just blend in the rag. Stain can be somewhat forgiving, because we can let it dry and apply some more once it's dry. If we try to apply stain on wet stain, it'll lift everything off when we go to rag it. So we gotta, once we've got this in place, we've got to let it dry before we put another coat on or try to fix any rough looking areas. But the goal is to get it right as we go. And there you have it. So that's your finished product. The door's upside down, of course. But there you have that white pine door stained. And there you have your edges. Now you have your top and bottom edges and side edges sealed. And as I say, this has just been freshly stained, so it's a little bit blotchy. That'll settle down as it dries. Those dark spots will fade, but it'll still look fairly rustic, and that's the look the customer was going for. See that the door is dry, or a lot drier than when we first put the stain on. You can just see the natural colors in the grain coming through that have been highlighted because of the stain application. And so if you're a little bit nervous about applying this stain to pine, what you can do is take a piece of the product, if it's available to you, a piece of raw pine, and just stain it and see how it dries. And just give it a little while. It doesn't take long, especially this water-based stuff. Even the solvent-based, it doesn't take too long to evaporate and dry off. So there you have it. So I hope you enjoyed that demonstration on how to stain wood doors. This could be applied to any piece of furniture that you may be staining, or any raw wood. We were dealing with pine, which is very white and shows the contrast, shows the problems we can get into with staining. But you may have a hard wood, you may have a darker wood that you're trying to stain up, and if it's a hard wood, you may not have the same overlapping problems that we experience with pine. But you have some pointers to get started with, or to improve on, make your projects a little easier and hopefully turn out nicer. So if you have any questions regarding this or any other video, or you'd like to see something demonstrated, drop me a line, and by all means subscribe. Until next time, it's been Craig the Muskoka Painter, helping you take the pain out of painting.